Here with us is trial attorney Ronald Chapman. Ronald, welcome back. Always great to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So the jury has seen a lot of this dramatic video. We've seen it over and over again. We've heard gripping testimony from people who were on the train. What kind of final notes will the prosecution and the defense make when court resumes tomorrow, Monday morning?
Well, the prosecution is going to paint Daniel Penny as a trained Marine who was on that subway and certainly probably aggravated by what was going on, but went way too far. That's what they said in opening. That's what they said in closing. I think they've certainly made a good case for the fact that the chokehold caused the death in this case. And they've also made a good fact that he was trained. But the question really is going to be one of intent. And I think that's where the defense is really going to score a lot of points with the jury. You've got people who believed they were in harm. You've got bystanders who testified favorably regarding the defendant. And you've got somebody who subdued somebody who was potentially going to be violent. This is going to be a very tough call for the jury, but the defense has a lot of room here to make a case that we have a good young man who never went out there to hurt anybody and was simply reacting to a very difficult situation. So I'd say it's going to be a tough one for the prosecution here.
We know the defense chose not to have Penny take the stand in this trial. Ron, I have to ask you, if Penny was your client, would you have advised to keep him off the stand as well?
You know, I think I was on with you earlier and I said that he has to take the stand in order to win this case. Yeah. And here's what I've found out since then. There was that videotape of him talking to the cops. They decided to play part of it. The defense was able to get in more. And essentially, they were able to get in his own testimony through the videotapes of his statement that he made to the police, which I think was a good move by the defense. And I think that means he doesn't have to take the stand and face cross-examination.
But do you think Penny not testifying is going to influence the jury, whether he did or didn't? Do you think that is going to factor in?
That's going to be a tough question. The jury is trained not to think about that. They're trained to not include that as part of their decision. And we assume that the jury is going to follow the instructions. But honestly, I've talked to jurors after the fact and they'd say, hey, I wish I would have heard from the defendant. I'd say in a case like this, there's going to be some thoughts that he's got something to hide. However, there have been some definitely racial tones to this case that have injected into it. And I think that there's a bit of fear on the defense part and putting him on the stand and having him slip up in that regard. And I think some people might be sensitive to that as well.
That's very interesting, very important. I'm glad you brought that up. The jury heard a range of conflicting reactions from witnesses who were on the subway when all this happened. How will the jury weigh the conflicting testimonies that they've heard from witnesses?
Yeah, I think that they're not going to find those conflicts to be too important because they have a videotape. They can be sort of an arbiter of what happened there, and they will be able to come to the ground truth of what really occurred. People saw different parts. But I think the one thing they will take away from all of the eyewitness testimony is that the perception of people was drastically different in that environment. And I think that perception is very important in understanding the actions that were taken on the subway that day. And hopefully the jury understands that.
So, Ron, based on your experience in a courtroom and with juries, what instructions and guidelines will a judge give to the jury as they deliberate tomorrow morning?
Well, certainly we know that there's the jury's been kept anonymous, which I think is really, really important. And this is going to be their decision. And they have a monopoly on the truth here because they sat through the entire trial and they've heard the judge's instructions regarding how they should make their decision. And I think they need to go back there and look through the facts of the case and make a determination. The jury instructions regarding the different types of manslaughter charges are going to be vital. And those are the things that often cause the most questions in these cases. I would expect a relatively early question if they don't understand how they're supposed to determine intent or how they're supposed to determine whether or not he's guilty of various levels of murder. And that's going to be a tough thing for them to figure out.
So from what you've seen play out in front of the jury, how difficult will it be for them to come to a consensus in this case? I know it's a hard question to answer, but I have to pose it to you.
It is, but the easy answer is I could very easily see a hung jury in this case. And so the way this happens is if a jury can't make a decision, they tell the judge, and the judge often reads an instruction. We call it an Allen charge, and get back in there and go back and deliberate. Well, if they still can't reach a decision and there's still a lot of disagreement in the room, they can hang as a jury, and then the case could potentially be retried, which would be a very difficult decision for everybody. I hope they don't hang. I hope they're able to come to consensus, but it's very possible in a case like this that we have a hung jury.
Well, we will be watching. Always appreciate your insight. I always enjoy talking to you, Ronald Chapman. Thank you so much for coming on.